Hello, thank you for joining me for another blocking tutorial. My name is Anniken Allis and today I'm going to show you how to block my new shawl. My new shawl is called Las Salinas and it's named after and it's inspired by a place in Spain where I go on holiday regularly. So on the southern Costa Blanca, there are, in another town called Torrevieja, there are loads of salt lakes. The whole southern Costa Blanca from Alicante downwards has loads and loads of salt lakes, and in Torrevieja there are a pink lake and a blue lake, so they're sort of salt lagoons. They're linked to the Mediterranean by a canal that brings the water in, and then the water evaporates and they harvest the salt. And it's got a huge feature of that area. So this shore is inspired by the Las Salinas of Torrevieja. So this is kind of what it looks like unblocked. So I'm going to show you how I block it. I have woven in all the ends. I've soaked it in lukewarm water for about 10 minutes. I used a tiny dash of soak wool wash. The two I recommend are soak and eucalan because they're both no rinse. So you can just soak it in there. I soak it for 10 minutes. Don't really need much longer than 10 minutes. If you have very strong colours, especially if it's hand dyed, but even commercial yarn, if the colours are very bright, you may get a bit of colour lost in the water. Now I've heard loads of things online by people saying, oh, that's because it's colour's not set properly and all that kind of stuff. It's probably just because there's excess dye. It doesn't mean it hasn't been rinsed properly either. You know, when you buy really dark blue jeans or a really bright red sweater, sometimes you can get colour loss in the first few washes, and that's the same with yarn in really bright colour. It's just the excess colour. So even though the yarn's been rinsed properly and the colour's been set properly, you still get a bit of colour loss. So don't worry about that. And the longer you soak it, the more likely you are to see that colour loss. It doesn't mean that your yarn's going to lose colour either, by the way. So I find 10 minutes is enough. If you do find you're getting a lot of colour loss, then maybe rinse it a couple of times as well. But you don't need to soak it for ages. You just want to make sure that it's wet through. If you are knitting with a silk yarn or a silk blend, you'll need to soak it for a bit longer because silk takes longer to soak up the water. Right, so this is a rectangular shawl, and I did kind of and ah about whether not to actually do a tutorial for this because of the fact that it's just a rectangle. But it's knitted on the bias. And I thought some people might be struggling to block stuff with straight edges. So I thought I'm going to block it, so I thought I might as well film myself doing it. So this is not a very, I don't have professional lights or anything. So I apologise if the quality is not the best. I'm going to open those curtains in a minute when I point the camera down on the table. But it's very, very dark outside today. It's raining, it's very dull. Usually it's when I film a tutorial. So I do apologise for the light. I've had to put the ceiling light on, otherwise it was too dark, and it's just not a great light really. So I'm going to flick the camera down on the table so you can see what I'm doing. And if you have any questions, just ask below the video and I'll do my best to answer. If you want to check out my other blocking tutorials, just go to my website www.yarnaddict.co.uk and you can see all my tutorials there. To block this shawl, I'm doing it on my dining room table. Now my dining room table is not as long as this shawl. It's a fairly small dining room table that seats 6 people. I could do it on the floor, but I have bad knees and it just hurts my knees and my back too much, so I do it on the table. So what I do is I block it the length of the table, pin that out, and then I slide these blocking balls off the table onto a chair and then actually onto my windowsill over this direction. So that's how I cope with having not a huge table. So I've got a mark here if you're wondering what this is. This is because I need to check some of the pattern repeats in this section of the pattern to finalise the actual written pattern. So that's why I've left that in. Normally I would take markers out before I block. Around this shawl there are yarn overs all the way around the edges. Probably can't see those. I like yarn overs on the edges. They are 2 stitches in from the edge. I don't like them right on the edge. The 2 stitches in from the edge, I like to have a row of yarn overs because that means I can put my blocking wires through them and it makes it a lot easier to block stuff. So I'm using these blocking wires. Mine are a bit twisted, as you can see, They just get twisted over time. So my blocking mats and my blocking wires and my blocking pins are all from Knit Pro. They're called Knitter's Pride in the US. You can get play mats for kids that look like these. You can get stuff in like hardware shops, I think. I think they're a bit bigger than this, but any sort of foamy mat or exercise mat, blanket. If you can hear my dog in the background, I apologise. He normally sleeps all morning, but he's just woken up. And he doesn't like his collar, so he shakes a lot and then you can hear it. Anyway, so I'm going to start by inserting the blocking wire through this lower edge. So what I do is I just go under 2 yarn overs, which you can't see, and then down. So I just go up and down 2 yarn overs each time. So I go into every other yarn over basically. I find that works quite well for me. You can do every one if you prefer, it's up to you. But if you have too big a gap between where you go in and out, you can end up with scallops along the edge, which is what you want to avoid. And that's a good thing with using blocking wires. You will get straight edges. You don't have to use blocking wires. You can use knit blockers from Knit Pro or Knitter's Pride, which I will show you in a second. I'm just going to finish this one. There we go. So you can use knit blockers. Just grab mine. These are the knit blockers from Knit Pro or Knitter's Pride in the US. They are like little kind of cones with like metal. These are really sharp. But to do a straight edge, you would need to like place them next to each other all the way along. So you'd need quite a few. So I think blocking wires and pins are probably the best way of doing straight edges. If you do a lot of shawls or a lot of garments, you will need blocking wires. So, you know, Christmas is coming up as a good Christmas present. So I've done it along the short edge, and then I'm going to do it along the long edge. So I'm just going in and out every other one. I found for me that gives me a nice straight edge without taking forever to do. You can just use, if you don't have blocking wires, you can just use pins, but you need quite a lot. Right, so because my table isn't that long, I'm actually going to do this section first, and then I can push those mats off the table and then do the rest of it. If you have plenty of space, it is probably better to put in all the blocking wires before you do, before you start stretching it. But you've got to work with what you've got. You know, if you haven't got the space, then you haven't got the space. If you're really struggling for space for big shawls, if it's a symmetrical shawl, see if you can fold it in half. Yes, that will take longer to dry, especially if you're in a dry, damp climate like I am in the southwest of England. But if it saves you space and you can block it properly, then you've got to do what you've got to do. I do find I have blocked things folded, and I find it harder. So if you can block it, you know, stretched out like this, then that's best. But you've got to work with the space you've got as well, and especially in Europe, a lot of houses are very small. Right, so you don't want to go right the full length of this. You want to leave a little bit either side because you are going to stretch this. So don't go right to the edges. In fact, I'm not going a little bit too far there. Okay, there we go. Right, and then I'm going to do the next, start putting the next wire in as well. I think this one I've done a little bit too far, so we'll do that. Okay, so I'm going to start putting in the next wire in. Be careful with the blocking wires so you don't catch them on your knitting. The ends can be a bit sharp, just on the ends here, so just be careful, especially with delicate knitting. Okay, so I've now put blocking wires in all the way along the long edges of the shawl. Let's just come up a bit. So now I'm going to start stretching it. So I'm going to start stretching it on this end. Now you can use any pins. I used to use dressmaking pins, but really blocking pins are a lot easier. Let me just push this down a bit so you can see what I'm doing better. blocking pins are much better. They are like T-pins. Let's see if I can show you. They're like T-pins. They're quite thick, so they're a bit stiffer. I find with dressmaking pins they were just too flimsy, and I was breaking them a lot. So blocking pins definitely are the best option for knitting, because they're just a bit sturdier. So when you block something, you can either emphasize the width or the length. If I stretch this, it's going to be shorter. If I stretch it widthwise, it's going to be, so if I stretch it lengthwise, it's going to be narrower. If I stretch it widthwise, it's going to be a little bit shorter. So you've got to decide which you prefer to emphasize, really. So I'm going to try and emphasize the width, I think, because it's quite long. So I'm going to take this edge and I'm going to just stretch that out. I quite often find that the short edge sometimes will stretch more than it will in the middle. This is knitted on the bias, so this might behave slightly differently, we'll see. And then I'm just going to put a few pins in. Don't put too many pins in for the first time, because you will probably have to go around and adjust them. And then if you've got like loads of pins in, it's just going to take you longer. Oops. Right. Love my bangles, my silver bangles. But they've got these silver bangles with like stitch markers on the end, but they do tend to catch on my blocking pins. And I meant to take them off before I started, but I forgot. So I'm going to take those off so I don't ruin them. Right, and then I'm going to, so as you're doing this, you want to stretch it, which is why you want to leave a little bit at each end of the blocking wire, so you can stretch it without without the fabric kind of coming off the end of the blocking wire, which I think actually might happen to me, but we'll deal with that if it happens. Okay, so just put in a few pins along here. I seem to have gone for very, very twisted pins today. And then I'm going to lean across and stretch this. I'm going to try and aim to stretch this the same width as the end. I'm not measuring at the moment. I just want to like do a rough, stretch it out into roughly the right shape and size that I want. And then I'll go around and measure and just check that the width is the same all the way along, but I don't do that to start with. If you're knitting a garment that has to be a certain size, you probably want to keep an eye on that when you start pinning it out, so that you're blocking it to the right size. But for shawls, it doesn't really matter that much. So I'm going to just slide this. So I've got a chair here, so I'm just sliding it onto that chair. Okay, so I just have to get another blocking wire. So I'm going to put the wire in on the end now. Good thing with this shawl is that these eyelets on the edges go all the way around the shawl, and it makes it so much easier to block it. And I'm trying to remember to put them in on all my shawls, because it just makes blocking so much easier. Sometimes I forget. It's easier for shawls when you're doing increases, because you're using the yarn over to increase, but it's easy to forget on shawls that don't need increases along the edges. So, right, there we go. Right, let's just see if we can stretch this shawl up and see how long it will stretch. I may have to, let's just, so when you stretch it, just hold on to the wires that you use on the sides. You don't pull, or make sure you pull them up so that on this end, they're quite short on the beginning end, so you don't pull the fabric off and have to do it again. So I'm going to need some more blocking wires on the end, so I'm going to slide this down a bit more. There we go. And then I'm going to put some more blocking wires in. Blocking mats in. I think I have 2 packs of blocking mats. 1 pack is not really enough for anything decent size, to be quite honest. So you probably need to get at least 2. Sometimes I feel like I could do with a 3rd pack, but there's also storage space. That's a bit of a problem. You definitely, if you're getting the Knit Pro blocking mats, you definitely need 2. So I haven't counted how many I've got, but for big shawls you need quite a few. Right. So I'm going on along the edge, stretching it and pinning it. Not worrying too much about how it's looking so far. I will deal with, you know, I will sort of fine tune it a bit when I've finished. But be careful here that I'm not, there we go. But be careful here. Be careful here that I'm not pulling the, because that's where the blocking wire, the end is, and I don't want to pull it out of the shawl, the edge of the shawl. Okay, so I'm nearly, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to just take this end bit and just pin a couple of pins in on the end. Okay, so I found I've just got a little tiny bit on the end here where the blocking wire is just wire is just slightly too short, so I'm going to use one of these nip blockers just for the end, just because it's easier than putting in another long wire. So now I'm going to stretch out the other end this end, so let's just slide this way slightly. There we go. So I find it easier to grab the pins if I just put a pile of pins in the lid of my blocking, my pin, just a little plastic top thing. If I just take out a bunch and put them in the, and I just find it easy in the lid, I find it just easier to grab them. Obviously you don't need to do that. Okay, so let's just have a look at this end here. So again, my wire was a bit too short, so I'm just gonna do this end like that. Okay, so now I've got roughly the right shape. So I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure the starting end down there. Okay, so now I've stretched out the whole shawl into roughly the right shape. Sometimes I'll just eyeball the width to make sure it's the same width all the way down. Sometimes I'll measure it. So the first blocking wires I got from the US. I think this came with the first set of blocking wires I got. The website says www.giftsbytip.com. I don't know if they're still around because I've had this for a long time. But I think that came with my first set of blocking wires, which I no longer have because I use them so much they get quite bent and oops. Right, so I just knocked all my nip blockers off the edge of the table. That was not very clever of me. But the good thing with these is that it's easier to measure. I tend to use a tape measure when I need like more accurate measure. So if I just want to get like a rough to make sure it's all the same width, I'll just use this because it's just quicker and easier. And then to measure it for my finished pattern, I'll use my tape measure. This has got inches on both sides. This is American. So it measures 23 inches here. So I'm going to just check. So that one is a bit narrower. So this is because I've blocked it along the edge here, right up to the edge of the blocking mass. So I'm just going to check that it is right up to the edge and adjust that slightly if it needs to. And then this needs to be a bit wider here. So I put it on the 23 here, and then I can just stretch it on this end. I'm also going to put in some more pins. So I'm just going to go all the way up and check the width. And that is when I also put in more pins along both edges if I need to. So I just line it up here with 23 on this side, and then I can just stretch this out so it is the right length. And this is why using one of these sort of yardstick type things makes it a lot easier. You can get those old-fashioned fold-up measuring sticks. they will work just as well. So I'm just working all the way along the edge. Okay, so now I'm going to slide this end, so I realised I was working off the cables. We're going to slide this end off a bit. I'll just move my chair so it was resting on the chair a bit more, and then where did I get to? So I did that bit. So this end is really quite a lot narrower than it is than the other end, so I just got to be a bit careful here that I stretch it out enough. You can see it will stretch out quite easily. If you find that it's not stretching out as easily on this end as it is that end, then you just stretch it too much lengthwise. So then just release the pins at the end up at this end, up at the top end, and then you can stretch the width out. Hope that makes sense. Right, so I'm going to just twist the camera around a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to do the top end here, which probably I should have done when I first pinned it out. So I actually want to go to here. So I actually put a pin where I want to go to. Then I'm going to take these off. I'm going to take those off actually, I think, because I think that'd be easier. And then stretch this out so it's the right width. In the end, just double check that. 23, yeah, so then 23. Okay, so that's where I want it to be. 23. Pin in there. So now I just got to do this bit that I did with my nip blockers. For the end here, I'm just going to use one of the smaller nip blockers. And then I'm just going to make sure the edge here top edge lines up with the edge of my blocking mat. Apologies, my dog barking. Okay, so I have stretched everything out now. I've checked all the measurements, so I've checked the width. I haven't checked the length yet because this is my design. This is the first time I'm blocking it. The pattern will be written to my measurements. So I just stretch it out the way I think it looks good, and then I measure it, and then I use that for the pattern. When you're knitting a shawl, you can either look at the measurements and check that you're getting the same measurements. I wouldn't say that matters a huge amount with shawls. If you don't check your tension, if your tension is tighter or looser, your shawl could be bigger or smaller. I would say it's more important that you stretch your shawl out so that the lace looks open and good. That is more important, and it's the right shape obviously. That's more important than getting the exact right measurements that the pattern says. Because if I'd stretched this a bit more lengthwise, it would have been narrower widthwise. If I stretch it more widthwise, it's shorter lengthwise. So bear that in mind as well. So it is important that you stretch it so that your lace is really nice and open, and that your lace fabric is as tight as you can get it. So I stretch mine so that if there wasn't anything underneath it, I could probably bounce a ball off it. I wouldn't recommend trying that, but you know, that's my goal. So it is very, very stretched. Thing is with, especially things that are knitted in wool, when you take the pin, when it's dry and you take the pins out, it will relax a bit. Wool that has a higher twist in the yarn, so yarn, if you get a piece of yarn, just want to see if I've got any wool nearby. Hang on. There's always wool nearby in my house. This probably isn't a very good yarn to try this on, but if you take the yarn and you kind of stretch it like that, so this one hasn't got very much stretch in it. I don't know whether you can see it. There's some yarns you can stretch it, it feels quite elastic. The more elastic the yarn feels, the more likely it is to shrink back once you have blocked it. So you will need to block it every so often, and it is a good idea to choose yarns that aren't too elastic, because they will keep their shape better. This is actually where I cast on for this shawl, and then I increased till I got to here, and then I knitted on. It was knitted kind of diagonally across, like that. And that's the other end, and I've actually put the other end. Let me see if I can just move this across. So I have put the other end, so here it's actually just resting on a chair. And that's how you can get use a smaller table for a bigger shawl. Okay, so I hope you found that helpful. My name is Anniken Allis. You can find me at www.yarnaddict.co.uk. That will be in the credits for this video as well. If you go to my website and click on tutorials, there are loads of tutorials there that you may find helpful. There's other blocking tutorials. There are various lace knitting tutorials, and I'm also going to try this autumn to do some more fixing mistakes tutorials. So check out the website. I will put the link to this pattern in the text below this video. So if you're interested in buying the pattern, you can look there. There's also be a link to my website there as well. And also, if you're interested in getting discounts on my future patterns, do sign up to my newsletter, because every time I release a pattern, I do a 25% discount, usually for a week, for my newsletter subscribers. So it's worth signing up to my newsletter, because you'll find out when things are released, when there's new tutorials, and you'll also get a discount. I'll also put my social media links below, so if you want to look me up on Instagram or Facebook, I have a Love of Lace Knitting Facebook group. I'll put that link below, so please come and join us if you like lace knitting. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.